Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all well. This lesson is all about what was the worst job in the Industrial Revolution. So last time we focused a little bit on children working during the Industrial Revolution. We're going to revisit those jobs today. We found out about the mule scavenger and the child chimney sweep, and we're also going to be finding out about other jobs today, like navvies, for example, here, who built many of the railways during this time. We're going to find out about people like bridge builders. We're going to find out about a knocker-up. We're going to find out about people like rat catchers and tanners, for example. So just have a think about those three questions. You can jot them down if you want in your book. What jobs do people have during the Industrial Revolution? Jobs changed massively during the Industrial Revolution. Why and how would jobs have been difficult? And how similar are the jobs today to those done during the Industrial Revolution? So what we're going to look at today is we're going to think about the jobs that existed during the Industrial Revolution. We're going to look at those different jobs. I'm going to teach you about some of those different jobs. And then we're going to try and evaluate which job was the worst. And it would be great for us to share our ideas as a class about which we think was the worst job in the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to tell you what I think was the worst job during the Industrial Revolution. And then next week, we're going to learn about transport during the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so just have a think now, and you can pause this. Try not to cheat, but you can pause this. And I want you to think which of these were real jobs in the Industrial Revolution. So we have here a range of different jobs, 17 jobs. So which were real jobs that people could have had in the Industrial Revolution? So we've got a trapper, a night soilman, a chimney sweep, a tanner, a knocker-up, prime minister, doctor, rat catcher, teacher, navvy, train driver, airline pilot, web designer, bridge builder, factory owner, scavenger, and priest. So which of these were real jobs in the Industrial Revolution? So hopefully you got that the vast majority of those jobs existed during the Industrial Revolution. The ones that didn't exist were an airline pilot, because planes weren't invented until the end of the industrial era, right at the start of the 20th century, with the Wright brothers making the first flight. And obviously web designers, the internet wasn't invented until the late 20th century, so there were no web designers in the Industrial Revolution. All right, so let's find out about some jobs during the Industrial Revolution. So we know that the factory system that we found out about created lots of new jobs in the factories, and we found out about people like the mule scavengers. But you know, the whole idea about an industrial factory created a whole new system of jobs. We have the bosses, we have the people organising the pay, people organising the trade, for example, people repairing the water wheel if that ever got damaged. So a whole range of new jobs as a result of this factory system in the Industrial Revolution, as society became, I suppose, quite a lot more complex. So we found out about the child chimney sweep last time. So the child chimney sweep, not a particularly nice job during the Industrial Revolution. Sweeping those chimneys, you could get stuck in the chimney, for example. Pretty bad for your health, breathing in all that soot, for example. Irritate your eyes. You might injure your ankles, for example. Lots and lots of problems with that job. This one is called a navvie. Now, the job of a navvie tended to be done by strong men. Lots of these jobs were actually taken up by people that had left Ireland to escape the potato famine. So many Irish immigrants escaping the potato famine had come over to England, and many of those people got jobs in building the railways. Now, the railway became a huge new method of transport during the 19th century. And from the 1840s, there was a huge railway building program, really, that began to develop in England during this time. So the navvies, their job was to build the railways and also the canals during that time. And most of this was done by hand. So the navvy had a wheelbarrow, and one of the big things they had to do was to dig out the places where these railway lines were going to be. So lots of, if you think about railway lines now, quite often where these railway lines have been sort of, they've kind of had to dig them out, okay, and make almost like little channels through the land in order for these railways to be. So lots and lots of digging, lots of filling wheelbarrows full of soil, and then taking up steep-sided banks, and you needed to be able to shovel about 20 tons of stone and soil a day. So this was a very, very hard job. This was hard work. You got paid basically by how much you actually were able to shovel of the soil and the stone. Quite often in the evening, not all navvies, but quite often, navvies would like a good drink, and quite often when the navvies were in town, people would know about that. There would sometimes be fights and fierce tempers and drinking. Disadvantages, diseases, lack of proper accommodation, the work was dangerous. Sometimes if you work on a railway bridge, or for example, you were having to build a new tunnel and using dynamite to blow that up, that could obviously be quite dangerous as well. There could be the risk, for example, of you falling down the bank with all your load in your wheelbarrow and that falling on top of you and getting injured like that as well. And obviously, you know, it's back-breaking work for a navvy, so it's a pretty tough job during the Industrial Revolution. Another job was the Matchgirls. Okay, now there were factories that made matches during this time, and this tended to be a job that was done by women, and quite a boring job. But this huge disadvantage in this, it was okay pay, 2 shillings a week, but the phosphorus that used to make matches was actually a very dangerous chemical and led to a condition where the jaw of these poor people doing this job actually began to rot away. And this was known as phossy jaw, and many people were left with agonizing injuries, and some people even died as a result of these injuries. So that wasn't a particularly nice job during the Industrial Revolution. Scavenger in a factory, we learnt about that last time. So that's a pretty bad industrial job during this time. Very, very dangerous. You could get injured by the machines. Again, back-breaking work. You're working sometimes up to 14 hours a day in this factory. Very hot in the factory, very, very dusty. You've got your boss, your overseer, who will beat you if you don't work quickly enough. So that's not a nice job at all, and that would be done by children between the ages of about 6 and 10 years old. Once they got over that, they would be too big to actually crawl under the machines. Talked about the trappers last time as well, opening the ventilation doors down the coal mines. Again, working long hours in the dark. Not for very good pay, very, very boring job, very lonely, nowhere to get to the toilet. So that wasn't a very nice job at all. This one is quite an entertaining job. You're probably not going to put this as the worst industrial job, but basically, during the Industrial Revolution, people's working hours were really important. So people had to turn up to work on time, because if people didn't turn up to work, then the machines weren't being operated, and they wanted to keep the machines going all hours of the day. So in the idea of the knocker-upper was that they had to wake up people on a particular street in a particular area near to a factory. So you need to make sure that you didn't sleep in, because if you slept in, then all of the workers in that factory would potentially sleep in, and the boss wouldn't be very, very happy. So what they used to do is they had a long stick, and they literally used to use this stick to bang on people's windows to wake them up. Now, you had to be quite careful doing this. You probably would annoy people because you were waking them up. You had to be careful about how hard you actually tapped on these windows. This is the days before double glazing, so it was quite relatively easy to break those windows. In the end, though, they actually developed a siren in the factories to wake the workers up. So because most people lived near the factories, there would be the factory siren, which would, and factory bells that actually call people to work. So that kind of put the knocker up out of the job. But quite an entertaining and interesting industrial job, I think. Next job is a bridge builder. So there were some people had a job that were working on building some of the great bridges. This one, you can see here, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He was responsible for the building of the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol over the River Avon. Quite an impressive job to be a bridge builder, but they didn't have the same health and safety that we had now. So if you're working at great heights from that bridge, if you slipped off that bridge, you were most likely to fall to your death. A tanner is not a particularly nice job at all. You need a very strong stomach for this. Basically, you're working in the leather industry, so you're converting cattle and sheep hides into leather. So you're going to work with rotten animal tissue. You're going to have to heat up dog and chicken poo, which will create this horrible pool of liquefied gunk, essentially, which is to treat the hides and to fill these hides with bacteria to help break them down. So it is regular pay, job security, but the smell and the types of things that you have to do, it was a pretty disgusting job, and you would basically spend your time smelling of a mixture of dog and chicken poo. So not a nice job whatsoever, a tanner, but worth it, I suppose, to create leather during that time. Next job was a rat catcher. So lots of rats during the Industrial Revolution. Jack Black was a man who was the royal rat catcher, and your job as a rat catcher would be to catch as many rats as possible, and hopefully catch them alive. There was a big sort of trade during this time in rats, because people used to like to see rats fight each other down local pubs and taverns. You can see a picture of that taking place there. The more rats you collected, the more money you will earn, but because you had to catch the rats alive, you would often get bitten by these rats, and the rats at the time, just like nowadays, carried lots of diseases. So if you got lots of injuries and bites from the rats, then you could end up catching a horrible disease and die. Certainly not a job if you are not a fan of rats. A night soilman, in the Industrial Revolution, as we found out when we looked at city life, during the Industrial Revolution, people would go to the toilet in what was called a privy. So they would go to this outside toilet, and it would just be like a little box over a hole in the ground, and they would go there and they would do their thing, and their waste would go into this hole. And the job of a night soilman was to empty the overflowing privies in the various cities. It might be London or Leeds, wherever it is, and empty what were called the cesspits, these things here. So you basically would go along with your cart and you dig out the toilet waste with a shovel and put it into these little cart that you had and take it away. Now, steady work, you know, there was always going to be a need for this work until they invented the sewage system, obviously. But very, very smelly, huge risk of contracting diseases like cholera and typhus through contact with all the waste and the poo. There are stories of night soilmen who actually fell into the cesspits and drowned in human waste. So not a nice job whatsoever, that one. So there are on the PowerPoint a few clips where you can actually watch some videos from Tony Robinson's Worst Jobs in History, which is what some of this is based on, and shows you where to watch from. So enjoy that if you get the opportunity to do that. So what I want you to do now is answer these questions. Which do you think was the worst job during the Industrial Revolution, and why? Why do you think industrial jobs were so much more dangerous than jobs today? And how similar are jobs today than jobs during the Industrial Revolution? So answer those 3 questions. Hand that in, please, via assignment, and I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas. Me personally, I thought that the worst job during the Industrial Revolution was the night soilman. I just think digging out other people's waste would have been absolutely disgusting. The smell would have been horrendous. The fact that you could have fell in and drowned in other people's waste just is awful. Absolutely awful. So that's my opinion, but you may well think differently. You might go for another job that you think was the worst job during the Industrial Revolution. So in terms of that lesson, we've learned that the Industrial Revolution created lots of new jobs. We know that many of them were very dangerous and low paid. Children were expected to work in factory jobs as well as in the mines. And we know that as the 19th century progressed, new laws were actually brought in to make working practices safer. And many of those jobs only existed for a period of time with the Industrial Revolution. But you can see some of the horrible, horrible things that people had to do during the era of the Industrial Revolution. Thanks for listening, and see you soon. Bye-bye.